South 1555 Phoenix Center, wind 2409, runway 26, clear line.
Clear line 26, Southwest 1555.
Welcome home, Charlie. You didn't deserve it. May God bless your family.
That was the airplane that carried Charlie Kirk's deceased body back to Phoenix, Arizona International Airport. I don't know what part of Arizona Charlie Kirk lived in, but I know it was in the Phoenix area. I don't know if it was the city of Phoenix or somewhere in the surrounding cities like Glendale, Mesa, Scottsdale, whatever. But if you listen to the air traffic controller, he said, "Welcome home, Charlie. You didn't deserve it." And I know there have been at least 1 million videos or more about the Charlie Kirk assassination, and people are still making videos about the Charlie Kirk assassination. But this video, I don't want to necessarily talk about the assassination itself. I want to talk about the nastiness from people who mocked Charlie Kirk and were, celebrating his death. And I also want to circle back to some other deaths that we've seen over the years. And it's kind of like this racial tit for tat situation going on. And I ran across this black liberal on Twitter who basically made a little video about how they were mocking the deaths of Trayvon Martin and George Floyd. And irrespective of what you think about Trayvon Martin and George Floyd, they were both human beings. And, two wrongs don't make a right. But this young man believes that because of all that stuff that was going on with those two young men, well, Trayvon Martin was obviously a very young man. George Floyd was a middle-aged guy in his 40s. But I'm going to play a few video clips and I'm going to get back to my commentary.
So, I haven't really heard anyone say this, but the callous memes and jokes about Charlie Kirk's murder are a direct byproduct of the Didn't Do Nothing era. And if you don't know what Didn't Do Nothing means, then you need to watch this video. And if you do, you should stay because a lot of this will resonate with you. So let's rewind to the early 2010s. Imagine you come home, you turn the news, and you hear about Trayvon Martin, who was a 17-year-old that was shot and killed by a vigilante while holding a bag of Skittles. Or you see the footage of 12-year-old Tamir Rice, who was shot and killed by police while holding a toy gun. Or Eric Garner being choked to death while saying that he couldn't breathe. Or Sandra Bland, who was wrongfully arrested and later found dead in jail. For many of you who were adults at the time, the tragedy and horror, as terrible as it was, pretty much ended there with the killings themselves and reconciling the injustice that happened. But the rest of us, Gen Z and millennials, who were mostly children at the time, the killings were just where the trauma began. Because that's when the internet exploded with the most shocking and vile memes and jokes about these people who had just died. And the Didn't Do Nothing meme was practically the face of this era. It was a ignorant and purposely fake African-American English way of saying he didn't do anything. As a way for online trolls and racists to mock grieving black families who claim that their loved ones were unarmed and undeserving of death. But make no mistake, it was not just this one meme. There was actually a whole ecosystem of cruel and edgy content that was meant to desensitize people and normalize making fun of black people dying. For example, this was a trend called Trayvoning, where white teenagers would dress up in a hoodie and lie face down with Skittles and a can of soda to mock the way in which Trayvon Martin's dead body was found. And more recently, we had the George Floyd challenge, which is pretty self-explanatory. This sort of online cruelty was foundational for the alt-right pipeline, with no regard for the families of the victims of police violence and little regard for the facts. And this dehumanizing content was born in the dark corners of websites like Reddit and 4chan, but what started out as edgy jokes in those places spilled over into YouTube comments, Facebook threads, and eventually mainstream conservative discourse. And while Charlie Kirk may not have been at the beginning of this phenomenon, nor was he necessarily the furthest right, he absolutely benefited from its culture and actively participated in its expansion. He spread content that told lies and was meant to smear figures like Breonna Taylor and George Floyd soon after, if not immediately after they were killed. And just to add on to that, a lot of people are focusing on only the direct quotes from Charlie Kirk himself, but that leaves out the organization that he founded and just how badly it contributed to this issue. Now, back then until now, many activists have said the solution is to teach people about why it's wrong to dehumanize others and implement stronger and smarter content moderation against hate speech. Instead, right-wing voices and Silicon Valley executives called that woke and just tore down all the rules. Of course, this made things worse and fueled even worse radicalization. For example, I recently wrote about the George Droid meme and how crazy and depraved this culture of mocking death had become in the wake of recent changes on platforms that allow unfiltered hate speech. But all of that fell on deaf ears, of course, until now. But I want to make something very clear. It is definitive that this morbid internet culture originates on the right. More specifically, the meme lords of 4chan and Reddit, the politicians and public figures that normalized and emboldened them, and the social media companies that make money by fanning the flames of all of this. And that has radicalized and desensitized both sides of the political spectrum. And we tried to warn you before it backfired. But that's all I can fit in this video. If you want my full essay on the topic, go to my Substack at historycan'thide.com. Or if you're on Instagram, just comment the word newsletter below to be DM'd a link. But what do you think about all of this? And did any of you guys also live through the Didn't Do Nothing era? Let me know in the comments and follow for more.
All right, so I don't agree with everything that young man said, but he brought up some good points, specifically when it came to the Trayvon Martin case. Like I said, regardless of what you think about the whole case, George Zimmerman was following him. He was walking home from the convenience store, and you could literally hear on the 911 audio recording, they released the audio recording, they told him to stand down, to leave him alone and wait till the police get there. And he started, saying stuff to Trayvon, and they got into a physical altercation. And I'm pretty sure that George Zimmerman felt bold because he had a firearm on him. And when Trayvon Martin was, beating him up, that's when he pulled out the firearm and executed Trayvon Martin. That situation was what I like to call a bait kill, where he baited Trayvon, and Trayvon unfortunately took the bait, and that's when he lost his life. George Zimmerman, as you can clearly see in the photo, is autographing Skittles. He even auctioned off the murder weapon, which is just disgusting in itself. You had young white men dressing up with hoodies on and blackface, as you see in this picture, holding a bottle of tea and Skittles with blood on the shirt. This was clearly racist. This was clearly disrespectful. This was clearly meant to mock Trayvon Martin's death. And like I said, not trying to compare this to Charlie Kirk, but this is something that actually did happen. And then you wonder why they raised hundreds of thousands of dollars for Carmelo Anthony. Now, I don't think that Carmelo Anthony should have had all that money raised for what he did. I believe that what he did was absolutely appalling, and I made a video about it. That got several thousand views. I believe that Austin Metcalf should be still living today. I believe that what Carmelo Anthony did was 100% wrong. And I do believe he will be found guilty of murder in the state of Texas. I was kind of about to say manslaughter, because you never know what the way these judges, really it's not even up to the judges, up to the jury, but we'll see. But I do believe he's guilty of murder. And what's so interesting about the way people are acting over the Charlie Kirk assassination is the black people who are mocking Charlie Kirk's death, they really don't have a dog in the fight, because Charlie Kirk was not even taken out by a black person. So he was actually taken out by a white person. We still don't know who the killer was, but the person wasn't black. On Twitter, somebody put, y'all remember when Trayvon Martin was murdered and they had George Zimmerman autographing packs of Skittles? Another person put, remember George Zimmerman was signing bags of Skittles after killing an unarmed kid? Y'all will be okay. And that was people's response shortly after Charlie Kirk's assassination, and people were mocking his death. And then, of course, this is the young man out there in Texas. He was a student at Texas State University, I believe. And he was mocking the death of Charlie Kirk, as we see in this video footage. And he was expelled from the university. The governor of Texas, Greg Abbott, even called for him to be expelled. This was very, very disrespectful. And I think he even spit on the ground of the actual, I guess this was like, I don't know if you would call this a vigil, but there were some people meeting up to honor the life of Charlie Kirk. And he thought he was doing something by mocking the death of Charlie Kirk. And there were even some black people who were calling him out at the campus. So you see all these memes popping up. Like I said, it's wrong in my opinion when both sides do it. When it came to the George Floyd situation, there were people making memes about George Floyd, as you saw in that video clip I played. And I know this is not the majority of white people, but it's enough to where when it goes viral and when it starts circulating around social media, people are generally offended. And the George Floyd situation was entirely different than Trayvon Martin. Of course, George Floyd, he did have fentanyl in his system. He did have, I think, also methamphetamine in his system. And many people believe that's why he really died. And I watched the whole 30-minute video prior to him being put on the ground with the knee on the neck by Derek Chauvin. And he was saying, "I can't breathe," long before he had the knee on his neck. That's a fact. You can go watch it yourself. And I have studied the side effects or the impacts of fentanyl. And it can cause difficulty in breathing. And that's a big part of the reason why people who use fentanyl or other opioids pass away, is because it can, restrict the breathing. It can stop your breathing, which is, very, very dangerous. So the memes, that's part of social media. These people who are doing these memes are obviously, probably young people who live in the basement at their mother's house. They're not really doing anything productive with their lives. Whether you mocking the black person who lost their life or a white person who lost their life, in this case, Charlie Kirk, I think it's tasteless. I think it's disrespectful. I think it's totally counterproductive for us as a society. And the politicians that are in office, they either incite it like Maxine Waters, or they turn a blind eye to it. I don't really think it's the politician's responsibility to stop it, but it is the politician's responsibility to speak out against it, because they're supposed to be our leaders. Years ago, we saw Maxine Waters telling Democrats to get into the face of some of these elected officials, which kind of does incite violence and chaos. And then we get people like Anthony Fauci, pushing forth these vaccines and lockdowns and mask mandates and, ruining our lives while we fight each other over, people losing their life that we didn't have no connection to whatsoever. We lose track of who the real enemy is. We lose track of the people who are screwing this country over every single day. These people, these politicians, they get away with murder while we fight against each other over, the deaths of people who we never even met. Most of us didn't even know Trayvon Martin. Most of us didn't know George Floyd. And most of us didn't know Charlie Kirk. And yes, Charlie Kirk did live a very good life, and he did do a lot of good things, but he had people that didn't like him. You know what I'm saying? The people we need to be worried about that you see on your computer screen or on your cell phone, they are laughing. They are happy that we're going at it with each other over these, these situations, these unfortunate incidents. I don't believe that Charlie Kirk deserved to die. I don't believe that George Floyd deserved to die. I don't believe that Trayvon Martin deserved to die. But differing circumstances led to their demise. And I don't want to get too deep into why they all died. But all I know is we can't afford to be fighting each other and making fun of each other in death, because the powers that should not be win every single time we play this game. It's like we're a hamster on the wheel, and it's almost like they know what the reaction is going to be. You see what I'm saying? If we too busy fighting each other, we can't fight them. And they get away with destroying our country one day at a time. And that's all I got to say in this video. We got to stop playing these games. We got to stop mocking each other. We got to stop doing all this tit for tat, because at the end of the day, it creates division, right? And it's going to make more people, want to retaliate against the other side when the opportunity presents itself. Because before you know it, another black person's going to get killed by the police or something like that. And then you're going to have white people mocking his death. Oh, well, they mocked Charlie Kirk. And then another white person's going to get killed. And then black people and other white liberals going to be mocking it. And it's going to keep going back and forth. Like, why are we doing this when we're losing our country? I hope I made sense. Let me know if you agree or disagree with me. I'll catch up. Like, share, follow, subscribe. Peace.